Well, here we are, another road trip, another purchase. This time it's a 4.5 hour trip one way. I've been on the road since 3 a.m. I'm trying to get this Ranger bought, and this guy hasn't been the best to deal with, but after driving this far, it's pretty much going to be a done deal, unless I show up and there's some major surprise. Let's see how this plays out. Well, I actually made it. I can see it sitting on a trailer up there. We're out in the middle of nowhere. Middle of nowhere. Beautiful out here though. He's so excited. Hey. Any early? Nice. It's a little bit of a fixer-upper.
You got this. Got a rainbow. Yeah, to see cows on. To take cows on? Yeah. We don't have cows. I don't know how to coordinate.
It's okay. Headed back with a Polaris Ranger 700 XP. I don't feel extremely great about it, but we'll see how I come out once I kind of dig into this thing. So let's back up a little bit of backstory. I've had this channel for about 2 years, and by far one of my most popular videos was this one, where I said I bought a basically brand new four-wheeler for $700. Basically the backstory is, started with a $500 Polaris 250 Trailblazer I bought from a friend. Ended up trading that straight up for a Honda Recon 250. Rode that thing for quite a while, and then I ended up selling that for $1,200. Ended up buying a Polaris Sportsman 500 for $1,400. So at this point, I've only spent $700 cash out of my pocket. I've just been trading up. Within the same week, I turned around and sold that Sportsman 500 for $2,500. I then took that $2,500, went and bought another Sportsman 500 that had almost no hours or miles on it. That has been an awesome four-wheeler. We've had it for a couple of years now. With a growing family, I really would like to have a side-by-side just to be able to put the whole family on and go cruising. My brother-in-law has one. It works out great with the kids, but I don't want to spend the type of money these things are bringing. They're so expensive. So I just decided a couple weeks ago I would list my Sportsman 500 up for trade for a side-by-side, willing to spend some money on top to just see how cheap I can get into one. The only offers I got were for ones that were broken and need a lot of work. I don't really have time to be doing that right now. I'm not that familiar with these machines either. So I had a guy offer me $4,000 cash. The same one that I paid $2,500 for 2 years ago. So I went ahead and sold it. So I've been looking really hard for a side-by-side. It's the typical stuff. I've got cash in hand. People just don't want to answer my questions. They don't want to go out of their way to set up a time for me to come look at stuff. I'm really trying to get into one of these by only spending another $2 grand out of pocket. So I've got $4,000 for my Sportsman. I'm willing to spend $2 grand more. You know, maybe a little more if it's worth it, but I really want to try to stick to that $6,000 budget. So if you do the math, even though I'm spending $6,000 cash, that would mean I'm only adding another $2,000 to my $700 I had invested in my trades before. So I would have a total of $2,700 in my own actual cash that I started with to get into a $6,000 side-by-side. So I found this one down in Arkansas, 4.5 hours from me. That's a significant drive. It looks like it's going to do everything that I want it to do. The guy says it's only got 180 hours on it, but it's definitely rough around the edges. It's definitely been used. 3,300 miles approximately on it. He sent me pictures of everything. The odometer is in the mileage on the gauge is really hard to read. It's kind of damaged and burnt or something on the inside. So you can't see the decimal point on the hours, but the miles are definitely 3,300 and something. Today was my only day I could run down to take a look at this thing. He's been a complete pain. I was supposed to look at another Honda right there just 30 minutes from where I live, and I tried for a week to go look at it. I told the guy I had cash. He was only asking $5,250 for this Honda Big Red side-by-side 4-wheel drive. I was like, look, I've got the cash, just show me the thing, and if I like it, I'll take it home. Guy would not set up a time with me. In fact, we set up a time. I took a couple hours off of work. I was gonna go in late to work one morning. He never contacted me back. I was like, well, if I can't get anything bought local, I guess I'm just gonna have to either spend a lot more money or drive somewhere. So this was one of the few options I had within my $6,000 cash budget. I asked the guy a lot of questions because his pictures were not great. And the guy sent me some other pictures, but there were several questions I asked like 3 times and he wouldn't give me the answer to. He was just really short with me, and then finally, there were several things that I asked. One being, does the seat have any rips in it? Because I could see something weird in one of the pictures from far away. He's like, no, the seat cover has no rips or tears. There were a couple other things I asked him about that he never answered me. So then he sends me another close-up picture of the seat, and he's like, oh yeah, there is a big tear right in the middle and there's black duct tape all over it. It was the exact thing I had questioned him about 3 other times before, and he goes, oh yeah, sorry, yeah, you were right, there is a big rib there. And then I could tell something was weird from the picture of the taillights, and I was like, are there any lights or anything busted on it? Well, then he sends me a close-up picture. Both taillights are busted. And I don't know if it's the whole assembly, if I can just get a replacement lens, I don't know. Wouldn't even tell me if the headlights work on it. He did tell me the winch does not work or is not hooked up. After he sent me the pictures of the broken taillights and that stuff, which he had never mentioned before, and he had told me 2 or 3 times the seat had no tears, and it did, I said I figured that would be something you might want to mention to me, at least tell me all the things that are broken on it. You haven't been open and honest with me to this point, and it makes me nervous to drive 4.5 hours with a trailer down there. And finally the guy said, well, he's like, I don't think this is the machine for you. It sounds like you're not happy. I've sent you pictures and answer your questions and you're still not happy with the condition of it. So he said, I can recommend a dealership. I think you should go buy a new one. So clearly my problem wasn't with the condition of the machine. It was with me having to ask him a million times and him still not being truthful with the shape of the machine. It's just everyone wants top dollar for what they're selling, but no one wants to put in the effort. No one wants to clean their machine. No one wants to answer questions. So anyway, he's asking $6,500 for it. I'm like, if I get my truck and a trailer and come down there, what's the lowest you'll go? He says 62. And I was like, can you get any closer to 5,500? He says 6. So we're at 6,000. So okay, makes my budget. So I told him today, Sunday, is my only day I can come. I said I'd love to get on the road at a decent time, you know, maybe leave around 5, 6 and get back and be able to see my family this afternoon, have dinner. I said if I leave at 5, I said I can get there around 9:30. I was like, will that work for you? And he goes, no, it's got to be 8:30. He's like, I could maybe stick around till 9, but he's like, you got to be here between 8:30 and 9. So then I got to ask the guy a million times for his address so I can even look up and see how far it is. I worked late last night. I didn't get home and get to bed till 11:30 or so. It's at the latest, to give myself any cushion whatsoever, I had to leave at 3:30 this morning. I got up at 3 a.m. after getting about three and a half hours of sleep, and I was on the road by 3:30. I already had my truck and trailer all hitched up the night before, ready to go. Here's a little bit how it went. I'm not sure how good the video is or what all I got. I just kind of kept it rolling, but here's a little bit of footage how it went. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
All right, man, it's pretty out here.
My ball of water. It ain't been driven since I sent you those pictures of it sitting in the shed
Oh, really?
a week and a half ago. Perfect. It's a good machine.
Tailgate open.
That tailgate's ever been open.
Yeah, I just couldn't tell with that picture of that crack. I didn't know if that was like structural to the whole bedside where it was hanging off, but it's solid.
Bedside's got a steel frame.
Yeah.
Under it.
Go in.
Hook the winch back up or whatever.
You check the oil under the seat, don't you?
Yes, sir.
Do you mind pulling that off for me and
Wrong top.
let's take a look at it? Yeah, I was trying to trade that Sportsman. So, long story short, I get there, I start looking it over, we get it off the trailer. I'm like, well, can I take it for a spin? I take it down the road. It runs great, starts up, runs great. Drives pretty good. The steering is real notchy and kind of nasty on it, but I know these earlier Rangers did have a lot of issues with their rack and pinion system, so not a deal breaker. Everything turns, everything works. It's got these aftermarket wheels on it that really make it look pretty nice, and it's got some really big meaty tires, which I don't necessarily need, but I'd rather have that than something that doesn't have meat on it. So the more I start looking this thing over, he ends up pointing out a couple other things that he never told me before. I asked him if the headlights work. He's like, oh yeah, the headlights work fine. So I was like, okay, let's turn the key on and check them out. I go hit the switch, headlights don't turn on. I'm like, okay, you said the headlights work. So he's like, oh, I swear to you, I didn't use the headlights much, but they did work. He's like, it's gotta just be a bulb or a connection or. So we start going through the wiring, and anyway, we find out the bulbs are good. The switch itself on the dash, which I did ask him also, do all the factory switches work like they're supposed to? And he said yes. Dash headlight switch has a short in it. So I have to like flick it back and forth like 5 times before the headlights finally come on. At least they work. So then I'm going to look at the hour meter and the miles and stuff on the cluster again. The button I hit to change that isn't switching anything. It's stuck on hours, and it's really hard to see what's going on there. We messed with it. We pulled that button out. Could not get it to switch from hours to miles. He did send me pictures of the hours and miles on his phone. It's really hard to read, but I was like, man, this sucks. I've driven 4.5 hours, and I really don't want to turn around and go back empty-handed, be out the gas and everything else. He's like, can I take $100 off to make it right for the odometer switch? I'm like, yeah, that's probably fine. So we're loading it up on my trailer, and I noticed one of the rear axle CV boots is got some grease on it. I'm like, well, that's leaking. I was like, I'm gonna have to replace that axle. So I go around to the other side. It's got a big gaping hole in it. And then as I loaded it on and the axle rotated, I noticed that both of the rear CV axles have big gaping holes in them. So I'm like, gosh, are you kidding me? He's like, oh, I never noticed that. I had no idea those boots were busted like that. And he goes, look, he's like, you're here. He's like, I'm tired of messing with people. Like, what can I do to make this right for you to take it home? He looks on eBay and finds them for $50 a piece for axle. And I was like, dude, I'm not putting $50 Chinese junk axles in my machine. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't put junk parts on my stuff. So I start looking it up and I find a brand that's like $160 for a pair. He'd already come down from 6,500 to 6,000. I was like, you're gonna have to knock off 300 more. So he thought about it for a minute. He's like, okay. He's like, I'll do the 300 more. Actual cash that I brought with me today, I spent $5,700 on it. But actual invested cash, from what I started with, I'm only in this thing for $2,400 out of my pocket from what I originally started with. You know, there's different ways to look at it. I'm in super cheap if you look at it that way. The only thing that sucks is that I noticed when I got there too, the odometer is showing 5 digits and he's saying it's 180.12 or whatever. Well, every Polaris I've ever had experience with, from what I could remember from my mind, only had one number shown past the decimal point. But I can't see the decimal point because the display is kind of messed up. So I'm like, okay, it's either got 180 hours or 1,800, which is crazy high. And I'm like, there's no way this thing has 1,800 hours on it. Anyway, we go ahead and do the deal. After taking the miles divided by the hours to come up with average mile per hour, my buddy's Razor, which I know for a fact he drives on the road a lot and averages pretty good speed. His average speed over the life of his averages like 12.9 miles per hour. My Polaris that I just sold, I want to say averaged like 6 to 8 miles per hour. You know, I used it around the house a lot, didn't drive it on the road very much. But we did the math on this one. If it was 1,800 hours with 3,300 miles on it, that comes out to be barely over 1 mile per hour average on this thing. I was like, no, there's no way. There's no way it's 1 mile an hour average. So I'm like, okay, it's got to be 180 hours. I was like, maybe this display is just different than others. And then my buddy did a bunch of research as I'm driving home. We were talking back and forth, and he's like, no, there are people claiming that when they use them on a farm a lot, they let them sit and idle, and they stop and open gates and all that. These older machines, some of these guys do have, you know, 1,500 hours or more on them with pretty low miles. So I'm like, well, great. At this point, I'm not even on my way back home yet, and I just bought a machine that I think had 180 hours on it, and it might actually have 1,800 hours on it. It's still only 3,300 miles. You know, it starts, it runs great. There was no smoke that I could tell. I'm gonna have my son get in it and rev it up so I can actually look. You know, even if that's the case, if it doesn't smoke and it runs good and still has good power, you know, all the suspension, wheel bearings, all that stuff, that's only got 3,300 miles on it, which isn't a tiny amount by any means, but it's not horrible. So here, backtracking to my prior video, my main points about how to find good deals on things like this is, don't be afraid to lowball people. Send out lowball offers all over the place. Don't worry about hurting people's feelings. If people get their feelings hurt over a lowball offer, they've got other issues. Don't worry about that. Not your problem. Eventually, you might get lucky and find someone that will take a lowball offer. They just want out from under a payment, want to pay it off, or they've got their eye on something else, or they just don't want to deal with selling it, and you're the first one that came along with an offer. Also, look and place in remote places. Get away from the big cities because you have a lot less competition. If you're willing to jump in the truck, take a trailer, whatever it takes, if you're willing to do a little traveling to go pick something up, that's going to be to your benefit. There's way less competition. You're much more likely to find those better deals because people don't want to travel from the big cities to buy that stuff. So a lot of times that stuff is for sale for a long time, and they're desperate to sell it by the time you come along with an offer. My example today is exactly why sometimes that puts you in a bad position. You know, I was only able to go a certain time today to get it, so a 4.5 hour drive, I had to be on the road at 3:30 a.m., which was not ideal. The other thing that's bad about that is by default, they've pretty much got the upper hand on you because they know you've driven that far. The chances of you going back empty-handed are pretty slim. So that puts you at the disadvantage sometimes. The other thing in my situation is I pretty much had 30 minutes or less to make my decision to check this thing out. And it was either, you know, buy it and leave or let him walk away and me drive back home empty-handed. So I had a lot of pressure on me. I didn't really have time to do much research or look it over really good. But as he's pointing these things out, you know, I told him, I said, that's why I've been asking you all these specific questions, because now I show up and there's all these surprises. And I told him I don't want any surprises before I left. So you're at the disadvantage. If they were dishonest with you and you drove that far, I mean, you can always turn around and go home empty-handed, but I know that always puts a lot of pressure on me. I want to buy if I've already made the trip and gone that far. So I hope any of those tips might help you guys find some good deals. Hope maybe you enjoyed this video a little bit, coming along with me on this journey. Please wish me luck on this one. You know, I'm halfway convinced that it may possibly actually have the 1,800 hours on it, which really ticks me off because I really didn't want a machine with that many hours, but it is what it is. I mean, it runs good, it drives good. I'm gonna either put boots or new CV axles in the back of it. I'm gonna get it cleaned up, fix, maybe get some taillight lenses for it, fix a few things. The roof, it's got a homemade roof on it that is coming apart. It really needs to be bolted to the roll bar better. But yeah, I'm gonna spruce it up and fix the things I can, clean it up. I think it's gonna clean up fairly nice. And if anything, my son and I have a trip to the Oklahoma dunes planned later this month. We at least have something to drive and take to that now. You know, I may just clean it up and use it in the meantime, and I may list it for sale in the middle of the summer for more than I paid for it, and see if I can trade up again, make some more money, and get into another one. That's all I got for now. Appreciate you guys watching. Appreciate your support on the channel. And I'll let you guys know the update on this deal, how it turns out in a future video. See ya.